Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NDP has spent the past days complaining about misinformation about Bill 6. The hyperbole and rhetoric from some people could have been avoided if the government had not begun by publishing what they themselves call misinformation and been upfront and honest with Albertans from day one. To the Premier, since even you have admitted the communications have been ineffective and confusing, which has farmers and ranchers in an uproar, don't you think you should stop on Bill 6 until they actually feel heard by you and your government?
Well,
thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question. As I've said before, in the next 4 months, if we were to delay it, we would have almost 140 people that were injured and wouldn't have coverage. We would have 4 or 5 people who might die, and there would be no right to refuse unsafe work. These are the level of fatality and injuries that are happening on farms. So we're going to take action now. But in the meantime, all that other regulation, all the other specificity will be consulted rigorously for months with all parties.
for supplemental.
Mr. Speaker, an amendment introduced today at 3:30 guarantees there's been no consultation because the farmers couldn't have seen the amendment. Right. Just last week, the School Boards Association sent a letter to the Education Minister stating that they had not been provided the opportunity for meaningful consultation. That's right. Giving we repeatedly hear for the same sentiments from farmers asked about Bill 6 to the Premier. Why do you think dictating policy to Albertans instead of listening to them is the best course of action? Good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as we have said before, it is very common to put in place the architecture of legislation, and that is what we are doing with Bill 6 to keep paid farm workers safe and to ensure they are eligible for WCB. But we are also committed to moving forward with rigorous consultation at a number of different technical tables to talk about how the regulations will apply and will be refined in exactly the same way that they have been in every other province, Mr. Speaker, while still maintaining the viability of family farms. That's what we're going to do here in Alberta too, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, consultation after the fact is like telling the prisoners when mealtime is after they're convicted. Last week, this government blamed hardworking department staff for the fiasco that is Bill 6. Our Albertans are now against government on Bill 6, 8, and 5, as well as on climate change, carbon tax, royalty review, the budget, and a pile of other issues. Isn't it time to admit you need to start listening to Albertans before launching in on legislation that they seem to almost always dislike?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, and it's interesting to see this coming from the member opposite, because it's standard. You know, you pass legislation and then you move to regulations and you consult on the regulations, and that's the way it works, and that's the way it's worked for a very, very long time. So the fact of the matter is, I mean, writing regulations behind closed doors and never talking to anyone about them, that's not cool, but that's not what we're going to do here. And we've been very clear that we are going to invite stakeholders, industry people, farmers to the table to talk about how the Employment Standards Code, the Occupational Health and Safety Code, and the Labour Relations Code applies to farmers in a